Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. The Kamchatka Peninsula, which is part of Russia, has been seeing a tremendous amount of geologic activity over the past few months. This is the site of the magnitude 8.8 megaquake that struck on July 29th of this year, 2025. There have been 3 magnitude 7 earthquakes, one of them preceding, 2 of them that just happened in September. And there's been countless amounts of magnitude 6 and 5 earthquakes and more. So this area has been extremely active seismically this year, starting at the very end of July. And in fact, right before that occurred, we had some historic planetary resonances which seem to be connected to this. So we'll talk about that as well. But the thing that happened after that megaquake is that a lot of volcanoes along the Kamchatka Peninsula started to wake up. There's a ton of volcanoes here. There's dozens and dozens. Actually, it's like 130 plus volcanoes along this peninsula here, and about 30 of them are active on and off. So there's a whole bunch that are inactive. A lot of them are very young, only being maybe 5,000, 10,000 years old. You also have some of the largest volcanoes in the Northern Hemisphere along this peninsula. So it is an extremely notable place on the Earth as it relates to volcanoes, volcanic activity, and clearly seismic activity. And what happened is that we had that megaquake. The volcanoes started to wake up. That trend is continuing. We just had some new volcanic activity get registered this month in October. And that was, I believe it was Kronotskoye volcano that was active just on the 3rd of October. We'll look at the list and everything. But we're continuing to get seismicity there as well. So we're getting these 2 most recent magnitude 7 earthquakes in September, and we've been having magnitude 6 earthquakes and magnitude 5s. And it kind of looks like it's not going to end in that there's something that it's building to or some final conclusion to it. That's the thing. Normally you get a big earthquake, you get the aftershock, and it like settles down. Here, we're getting the seismicity to continue, and these volcanoes are increasingly coming online. And so the question that I have is, are we looking at some sort of big eruption to occur here, perhaps even something that would trigger a volcanic winter? When you go from a mountain to a caldera, you have a massive stratovolcano, and its eruption is so explosive that it actually just creates a caldera afterwards. And you may think that is kind of an exaggeration of what could happen, or it's just like too much, but we see this time and time again across the planet, these sort of examples. For example, here we have Santorini in the Aegean Sea. This used to be a pretty big volcano mountain, right? Now it's a caldera. 1600 BCE or so, that erupted with a massive, massive eruption. We don't really even know the upper limit of it. And guess what? There was seismic activity that was occurring before that eruption. In fact, before a lot of big eruptions, like the biggest eruptions, we usually get big earthquakes, magnitude 6, 7, even maybe 8. So there is a connection between them. It seems that large earthquakes help to trigger these largest of volcanic eruptions, whether that's by the pressure wave hitting the magma chamber, causing some sort of chain reaction, right? And or by creating a fracture zone above the magma chamber that then causes it to explode. But right now we're seeing all this activity in Kamchatka. And if we had to look at one location that is the most likely to have some sort of very big volcanic event, it would be this peninsula here, which is north of Japan and to the west of Alaska. So let us look at our recent seismicity, and then we're going to get into some of the volcano data and more. Here we have our latest earthquakes for this area, and this is set for 2025 up to today. You'll notice a massive amount of earthquakes here, okay? It's set for largest magnitude. So here's our 8.8, our 7.8 that occurred back on the 18th of September, a 7.4 which preceded that. Here's a 7.4 earthquake that occurred July 20th before the magnitude 8.8 megaquake. And then here we see our magnitude 6 starting, but this is a 6.9 there afterwards on the 30th. And so based off of normal earthquake rhythms and patterns, we have had a clear aftershock to this 8.8 because this is one magnitude less. So it is very possible, and maybe it's the most likely outcome, it's hard to say, that this is a normal earthquake sequence and that nothing is out of the ordinary here, and eventually this will subside down, perhaps by the end of the year. The key difference is that we have all these volcanoes here, and they are increasingly coming online. So that's why I think that there may be something more to this. But we see all these magnitude 6 earthquakes. I don't know the exact number, but you can look at them here. I mean, it's at least a couple dozen, if not even maybe 3 dozen of them. That looks like 2 dozen magnitude 6 earthquakes, and then countless magnitude 5s. And if we switch this to the newest earthquakes here, we see our magnitude 6.1 that occurred there on the 3rd of October. Look at all the magnitude 5s that have occurred since then. That's not normal activity as it relates to that being those being aftershocks for the 6.1. So if these were aftershocks for the 6.1, there would be maybe like 2 or 3 magnitude 5s maximum. Probably actually more like magnitude 4s and 1 magnitude 5. But we still have all these magnitude 5s there after that 6.1. And we go back a little further, you'll notice other magnitude 5s, of course a bunch of 5s and then 6s. And it's basically just continuing on and on. So I'm looking at this area very carefully, and the seismicity seems to be indicating that maybe something bigger is soon to come. It could be another magnitude 8+ earthquake. We've been talking about that. It could be a big volcanic eruption. I'm starting to think that is a distinct possibility. Here we have our earthquakes for 2011 specifically set for this area around Japan, because we can compare and contrast what happened in Russia this year, the 8.8 megaquake, with the magnitude 9.1 Great Tohoku earthquake, which is the last big earthquake that we've had since the megaquake in terms of sheer magnitude and scale. So this was bigger, and that 9.1 means it's actually quite a bit more seismic energy release than the magnitude 8.8. But we can look at this for trends. So we had this 9.1. You'll notice that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 magnitude 7 earthquakes after that 9.1. The strongest being a 7.9, and that Great Tohoku earthquake ruptured on March 11th. So we see that that's also March 11th, March 11th. This is the 9th. That was a foreshock, a 7.3 foreshock, very similar to what we had in Russia. And then here we see this was an aftershock, April 7th of 2011, and then another aftershock that followed in July. So you do with these really big earthquakes get aftershocks that are still quite significant that follow in the months afterwards. You'll notice a ton of magnitude 6 earthquakes here. So let's say there's about 2 dozen magnitude 6+ earthquakes, 6 to 7 earthquakes for Kamchatka. You'll see that it's probably more like 3 or 4 dozen magnitude 6 earthquakes here within this box that I put. Probably at least 4 dozen. So about 50 or so, but that's not an official count. That's just me visually gauging it. Tons of magnitude 5s. So in the context of Japan, what is in this magnitude 9.1 earthquake, what happened in Kamchatka is not necessarily abnormal. Of course, anything that's above a magnitude 8 is pretty abnormal to begin with. But in this context, it is playing out kind of like you would expect. The difference is we have these volcanoes that are erupting. So here we have K-Vert, which is the Kamchatka Volcano Active Response Team, something like that. And we see all the volcanoes that have been identified going from Kamchatka through this island arc there. And the green ones are the ones that are inactive, like they're not doing anything right now. And they're very fast to update this. So if there's an eruption, it will show up as basically red or orange. And then the moment that eruption ends, let's say it's totally done, boom, they'll put it right back to green. So there's no like kind of 2-week window that they put around this. So when we see 3 volcanoes here, this is showing that right now, like at this exact moment, there are only 3 that are doing anything notable. But you'll notice that there are a lot of volcanoes, you know, there's like 100 plus volcanoes, and 30 of them are known to be active on and off. But let us go to this here, which is our way of seeing the information releases that KVER has been putting out as it relates to volcanic activity in Kamchatka. And this is where you can really start to clearly see the trend. So we'll go back. So here, we're really primarily looking here. Let's click on July. Let's click on June. Let's actually click on all these months for 2025, okay? And they put out a daily alert, and often there's nothing to report, right? So here we have January, okay? And anytime you see a little question mark and it's orange or yellow or red, that means that there's something happening there, whether it's small or large, okay? But look at how many days there are where there's nothing happening. Now, January is actually kind of active, but look, February, basically nothing was happening. March, there was only 1 significant event that occurred on the 30th. And then we go to April, we do see Bezmeniani volcano show some activity there with some eruptions. It's on the 23rd of April. We go forward, May was fairly quiet. Shiveluch, we do have some volcanoes in Kamchatka that are effectively erupting on and off all the time. Shiveluch is one of them. Kluchevskoy is another, that's one of the biggest. We see June here, very, very quiet. We see July there, pretty quiet until that megaquake. Look what happens right after we go from the 29th of July. In fact, local time for them, that was July 30th. That quake occurred at 11:23 local time for Kamchatka, July 30th. So we have Kluchevskoy volcano that erupted right as that megaquake hit. Look at August. All of a sudden, see that shift, and all these are either orange or red. Huge activity from Kluchevskoy in the early part and middle part of August there. We also had Krashenikov volcano all of a sudden wake up, and that was the first time it's erupted in 600 years. And then we see that activity continued going into September, though it did reduce it down a bit in frequency. But now we see, if you look through this list, and I'll link this in the video description, you'll see that we start to get other volcanoes to erupt. So just in the past couple or few months, since that magnitude 8.8 quake, we've had the following volcanoes show a lot of activity. We've had Shiveluch volcano here show a lot of activity. We've had Kluchevskaya volcano here show a lot of activity. This, I believe that's the largest volcano in the Northern Hemisphere, if I'm correct. And there's, yeah, exactly. So it's one of the largest volcanoes in the Northern Hemisphere, and it's also quite active. And so if you're going to have a huge volcanic eruption and something that could even trigger volcanic winter, this is like a VEI 7 eruption, like a historic eruption, you need a big volcano to blast off that 100 kilometers or greater, cubic kilometers or greater material. To go from mountain to caldera, you need a big volcano. So we have big volcanoes in Kamchatka. That's Kluchevskaya. We also here have, what is that? Kronotskoy. Yeah, Kronotskoy volcano. That's another perfect stratovolcano. Look at that. If that thing erupted and the whole thing just became a caldera, that would be very, very significant. That has recently just erupted starting October 3rd, I believe it is. And we can actually go back to our alert page that we were looking at. So we have here October, we see Shiveluch volcano. Yeah, October 4th. Kronotsky volcano there, October 4th erupted. So that's a new one after this megaquake. And we also have Krashenikov volcano, not the biggest volcano compared to the others, but the first time it's been erupting in 600 years. And we also have Karminsky volcano here, another stratovolcano, not the biggest, but still you wouldn't want to be there when that thing blows. That's been active. There have been a couple other that have been active as well, but these are like the big 5. They all kind of start with the name, the letter K. So that is kind of concerning, honestly, to me, because what we see is that often before the biggest volcanic eruptions, we get big earthquake activity. So let's check that out. Here we have just an infographic that I created, and I'm just going to run through this and read this off to you, okay? Earthquakes before large volcanic eruptions. Major volcanic eruptions often have a seismic component to the eruption buildup. A good example would be Vesuvius, which is a VEI5 eruption that's greater than 1 cubic kilometer of material ejected. That's like dry rock equivalent volume. Vesuvius had a major earthquake 17 years before its eruption in 79 AD. Krakatoa, VEI6 eruption. There was a major earthquake that occurred there 5 years before it exploded in 1883 AD. That was the boom heard round the world. It created such a large sonic boom, it's heard thousands of miles away. Pinatubo, VEI6 eruption in 1991. There was a major magnitude 7.7 earthquake that occurred a year before its eruption. Santa Maria was a VEI6 eruption. That's greater than 10 cubic kilometers of material. It had a major magnitude 7.5 earthquake 6 months before its 1902 AD eruption. That was one of the biggest of the 20th century. And there was notable seismic activity that started at the volcano 3 months before that major earthquake. So you had seismicity increasing, then you had that magnitude 7.5, and then boom, you had one of the biggest volcanic eruptions of the 20th century from Santa Maria volcano. Huaynaputina was a VEI6 eruption that occurred in 1600 AD, and that was just a year after a major earthquake occurred there. And archaeological investigations at Santorini found evidence of earthquake damage from some time before the eruption, and that was a VEI7 eruption around 1600 BC that destroyed the entire civilization that was on that island effectively. So that was a very, very, very big deal. Now what we can also look at are these the prime candidates for there being a major volcanic disaster, because if we want something big, we don't want this, but right, for there to be something big, you need a big stratovolcano to go. And these are the ones that are showing some activity and or they're just really, really large and they have the potential to do so. Keep in mind that some of these volcanoes in Kamchatka are quite young. So they've just recently formed, which really, I mean, to have a volcano, let's say this big, form in 10,000 years is crazy. Well, there's a lot of activity happening at the Kamchatka Peninsula because of the subduction there. So we have these big earthquakes, we have these big volcanoes, and it could very well be the site of one of the next big volcanic eruptions. So we have Kuryatsky volcano here, massive stratovolcano. Kluchevskoy, this is the biggest on the Kamchatka Peninsula. Kronotsky volcano here, I believe this is the second or third largest volcano on the Kamchatka Peninsula. You can see that these are just massive, massive stratovolcanoes. Krashenikov here, it is smaller, but it's notable, and I put it in this graphic there because it's erupting for the first time in 600 years. And it's one of the few volcanoes that started erupting after that quake and really hasn't ended. So it's been continuously erupting effectively since the beginning of August. We can also look at our data, our Morova data, to kind of just see this progression here. And so we have a list of a whole bunch of volcanoes around the world, and the ones that are very active right now, they show up in red or orange. It depends on how much of a thermal anomaly that they are broadcasting. And this specifically is middle infrared observations of volcanic activity. So this is from space. So this allows us to kind of quantify the level of volcanic activity that is occurring for any volcano. And these are the most notable ones here. So we can click here, Krashenikov volcano, and we'll notice that right after that megaquake is when this guy turned on. And it's been having high activity ever since, basically continuously. See that? Anytime they measure it, basically it's doing something. There's some sort of outflow of lava there. That's Krashenikov volcano. If we just go a bit over to Kluchevskoy volcano, we can see the radiative power here. This is like thermal energy, so like radiative energy, not radioactive, okay? But we see its activity here and it was very, very low. Starting around mid-April or maybe beginning of May, it did start to increase. Then we had that megaquake end of July, and then look at how this peak nearly reaching extreme levels before now dying down, but it is still elevated, greatly elevated over what it was before. So a clear connection between that magnitude 8.8 megaquake and all the other earthquakes there and this eruptive activity at Klubchevskoye volcano. So it's very possible that we get a massive volcanic eruption here in the near future because of that earthquake swarm, and that in fact this is more a symptom of some other change, or it's working in tandem with some very powerful energies that are rising from deeper within the earth. This is a subduction zone. So here you have oceanic plate going and subducting below this oceanic plate here. Well, it's kind of continental oceanic. You can see that the continent starts fairly soon, but you have this continental shelf, and while this peninsula has all these volcanoes coming up, because as a result of that oceanic plate subducting down, you get changes to the temperature and the pressure. The best ideas that we have right now is that there's a lot of water that's sequestered in that oceanic plate. When it goes down, it percolates back up like this, like a lava lamp. Really, that's a pretty good example or visualization. And then you get all these volcanoes to form. So that's why there are so many volcanoes. These are only 5 that I've labeled, but again, there's 100+ volcanoes. And so I've just been thinking about how this is very strange. What's happening is very strange. I wanted to report on that because we are continuing to get earthquakes here, and we're getting new volcanoes to come online. Even if it's just for like a day and it's erupting, the fact that some of them like haven't erupted in decades or hundreds of years is quite notable. So this didn't happen in 1952 when we had the magnitude 9 megaquake roughly in the same location. This time appears to be different with the volcanic activity. And there's one other thing that we can look at which is interesting. I don't put all my salt in this, but here we have the astronomical chart for that megaquake, the exact moment of it. And I call this an astronomical chart because this is a true sky constellation chart. So we're looking at the position of the planets and also the position of the western horizon, the eastern horizon, zenith, and directly below the planet, accurate to scale and everything. So these are the constellations, not signs. This is not Western tropical astrology. These are the constellations accurate to size, and this is set for the exact time of that megaquake. There's a few interesting things here that we'll look at. The most notable, I would say, would be this near conjunction between Neptune and Saturn. We have a legend over here. If you don't know what the symbols are, you can look at this. And the link on how to make your own charts is, it's like Mastering the Zodiac, I believe, .com. It's linked in the video description. We have a near conjunction between Neptune and Saturn that was occurring in the night sky, or just in the sky in general, in our solar system, in July of this year, 2025. They didn't get exactly conjunct though. You'll notice that there is a little bit of difference between them, just arc minutes apart, but still they did not go exactly conjunct. That kind of tells you that if this is connected to, the earthquake is connected to the planetary resonances, then maybe we should be looking at something to unfold when they do go conjunct, or around that time period in February of 2026. Because we had this big event that occurred when they were nearly conjunct, but then they're actually going to perform their great conjunction, which is like a 35, 37 year cycle, only happens once at that time frame. Maybe that is an indication that something's going to happen there. Now, this is also notable because there was a very significant alignment that was occurring in the sky between Saturn and Neptune, also with Pluto and Uranus here. So they are in a 120-degree aspect, and they still are effectively right now. It's only Saturn and Neptune that are about 3 degrees separate at this moment in time. But Uranus and Pluto are about 120 degrees. At this moment in time, they're exactly. And they're also sextile, 60 degrees to these. And we have Mars there in perfect opposition to this point. Now you'll notice that we have Mars and the moon on the ascendant. So that is the horizon. That is the western horizon. The sun is setting like this. Or maybe, no, because this was 11:24 local time. So the sun's going like this, I believe. So this is the rising horizon. Basically the part of yeah, exactly. So this is the part of the sky that's rising, that's indicating kind of the future direction. And this is the part of the sky that's descending. So we see that this is also pretty much right on the descendant. We have this perfect geometry where we have Mars and the moon on one angle, one angle of the kind of the cardinal chart, and we have these guys on the other. Uranus is in Taurus, which is a constellation related to the Earth. It's fixed Earth, so it's representative of there being big shake-up and changes to the Earth. It's connected to earthquake activity, lightning and electricity and more, geomagnetic storms and such. You'll notice that we have Jupiter on the midheaven, so that's directly zenith overhead. Jupiter is this agent of expansion and amplification and intensification. It just seems to make everything bigger, inflation and more. And we have Pluto here underneath the planet. So this is the daylight side. This is the daylight sky. We have the sun overhead. So it did not happen at night, right? This is universal time, but local time, again, is right about noon. We have the sun almost exactly overhead, pretty close to the midheaven. Jupiter, though, was right there. Pluto, which is representative of the underworld and like the deep earth, was on the other side of the planet, very much broadcasting its energy through the earth before it then reached the surface in Kamchatka. So we had this really perfect alignment. The moon on the ascendant almost exactly, I think, is really interesting because that earthquake occurred just off the coast of Kamchatka. So we can look at it again right here, this magnitude 8.8 megaquake, and we know that the moon is connected to the oceans and the tides, and it resonates with that water element. And so it being right there on the ascendant shows that that lunar signature is baked into it. But then Mars, which is related to energy and aggression and sudden breaks and snaps and severances and changes, is also right there on that ascendant. Very, very interesting astronomical alignments that were folding, and the archetypal significations were also very interesting. But the biggest key here is the fact that these two were not fully conjunct, and that they will be later is kind of key. Also notice that they are in the constellation of Pisces. Again, this is true sky. So they're in the constellation of Pisces, which is the ocean. And well, this was a magnitude 8.8 megaquake that occurred off the coast. It actually generated a tsunami as well. Not a big tsunami, but it did generate a tsunami that went across the entire Pacific Ocean. So, I mean, big tsunami, but not a super destructive one. It was only destructive right here on this immediate area in the coastline. So I wanted to present what's been happening with Kamchatka, the volcanoes, the earthquakes. The earthquake swarm is continuing. More volcanoes are waking up. We are definitely at a heightened risk of there being a big disaster here. But the question is, what's the percentage of that? I don't know. But we have all the factors in place, and the conditions are there for there to be some sort of big volcanic event. And if it's large enough, VEI 6, VEI 7 would really be the key. You know, greater than 100 cubic kilometers of material ejected, VEI 7 would trigger a volcanic winter. And this is looking very powerful for that. There's also one other thing I can pull up. Let me show you this. And this is the planetary geometry that we have right before that conjunction. We'll zoom the Earth forward to the beginning of January, right about here, and look at the alignment that we have between all the inner planets and Jupiter. So we have Mars, Venus, Mercury, the Sun, Earth, and Jupiter right around the beginning of February. From about the 6th of January to the 10th, this alignment is really, really key. And based off my research, I spun around this thing a bunch and went back, you know, more than 100 years. I went back like 1,000 plus years and looked at different events that occurred during key alignments. Not every alignment like this lines up with the geologic event, but a lot of them do. and you don't get these sort of alignments all that often. That's the thing. Sometimes you get a cluster of them, and then you'll have like 50 years where you don't have anything that looks like this occur. So we have this coming up at the beginning of January, and then that's the last significant alignment for at least a few years in terms of like obvious geometry like that. This is Solar System Scope as an application. You can download it yourself if you wanted to. You can zoom around, but in terms of like all the planets and their alignment and such, we don't get anything like that until at least, I believe, 2040. That's when like the next kind of significant alignment occurs between some of the inner planets and the outer planets. So yeah, some very powerful energies that are active at this moment in time. Of course, we have these comets, we have 3i Atlas, we have solar maximum that's been feeding a ton of energy into the entire Earth energy system. And we are going to have solar maximum continue in 2026 and start to go down probably around the middle of 2026. I think really actually that conjunction of Saturn and Neptune will probably mark the beginning of the descending phase for solar activity, and we'll start to go down in terms of our sunspot numbers. But we get a lot of, we get almost as many geomagnetic storms during the descending phase as we do during the maximum phase. At least with our recent historic data, that is the case. And another thing to point out here, I mentioned, Vesuvius, Krakatoa, Pinatubo, Santa Maria, all these eruptions here. This is a fairly short sample and time window if we look at this from a geologic perspective. And see, these are some of the biggest eruptions that have occurred in recent history and like in known history. So the fact that a lot of these big volcanic eruptions have big earthquakes that occur shows you that there is a connection. And that is why I think what is happening in Kamchatka is especially notable, because we have the earthquakes and the volcanoes all occurring simultaneously. So yeah, now before signing off, I'd like to direct you to the earthevolution.com/store, the website, because we just hit 500,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much for joining the channel. If you are a subscriber, thank you. This is awesome. I remember when I hit 1,000, and that was a real grind to get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, unless you're kind of cheating the system, and you don't want to do that in the long run. It doesn't work out. And I remember setting a goal of 10,000 to 100,000 for the year ahead, and I was like, this is astronomical. I don't know how I'm going to do it. Well, now we're at 500,000. So it shows that hard work really pays off, good reporting, all that and more. So I was talking to my dad about this. We hit the number today, and he's like, well, we're going to have a big sale in October to celebrate, and also to mark the some of the significant alignments with interstellar object 3i Atlas. So stay tuned for that. But that's in October. He said, know what, let's go ahead and take all the artwork I have and knock it off 50%. So all the artwork here that you see, this is canvas prints. I actually have one hanging up in I'm looking at it right now. I should have untacked it before the video started. But these are all white canvas, and they're printed on, so it's a digital print. But my dad is a natural soil pigment artist, so he collected these soil pigments from different geologic environments and seeing an interesting soil color, let's say while driving down the highway, like, hey, that's a really crazy yellow color. Grab like a couple of buckets and extract the pigment. He then paints with that. So these are paintings from across the years that we digitize, and we have some prints available. And I love these. It brings in a lot of that earth energy to whatever space you hang them. This is a, what is this? This 22 by 28 inch print. So it's quite large, but it's not like super massive. All these are 50% off. So there's a link that gives you a discount automatically in the video description, or you can use the code SOILART50OFF, all one word. So SOILART50OFF. And yeah, these will ship out to you pretty quick if you pick any of them up. And it's only for these products, and it's only for those people in the United States. So no international shipping at this moment in time, and that 50% off code does not apply to anything else because we're kind of low on stock right now. So this is a promotion as of right now, just a thank you for everyone for the 500,000 subscribers, which is really incredible. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching, everyone. I've been your host, Stefan Burns, wishing each and every single one of you well. I'll be back with more updates in the near future, so make sure you subscribe if you want to stay up to date with what's happening with the Earth. We talk earthquakes, volcanoes, geophysical energies, space weather, solar activity, planetary resonances and alignments, cosmic forces, these comets and interstellar objects and galactic forces, all that stuff, consciousness and more. Then you have found your home. Welcome to the Soul Tribe. Now we're on the road to 1 million, so we'll see how fast we hit that. But though we're not in a rush, it's more about quality over quantity. So thank you all for being amazing human beings, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you.